Hi, welcome to Spiritual Connection. I'm your host, Katie Augustyn. So I'm a transformation coach, I'm an energy healer, I'm a shamanic practitioner, and a spiritual leader. And I started this show called Spiritual Connection because connection is a really important core value of mine. And so I wanted to share this with everybody else. And it's about connecting with each other and also about connecting more fully with our spiritual natures. So welcome to the show. So my guest tonight is Nadja Streiter. Welcome to the show, Nadja.
Oh,
are you too busy to talk to us?
Were you talking to me? Hi.
Yeah, welcome. So a little bit about Nadja before we start. So she is a licensed master social worker and a psychotherapist at the Center for Internet and Technology Addiction. Along with the founder, Dr. David Greenfield, she treats clients who find themselves suffering from the consequences of being overly dependent on technology or being compulsive users or even those who are addicted. So Nadja is also a mother of 3, and I've known her since our kids were in elementary school, which was quite a while ago, although it seems like yesterday to me. So I ran into Nadja a few weeks ago, and she started telling me about what she's up to. And I was so interested, and I told her about the show, and I said, would you please come on and be a guest? Because I really do think it's an important topic, and a lot of people will be interested to hear more about it. Yeah, so again, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And you know, I want to start with just asking you, how did you get interested in this topic of technology and internet addiction? And you know, how did it start? Was it through you being a parent and through your kids, or what?
It was in some ways through my children, but not in the way that you would think when you think about how parents are considering technology in their children now. There were a series of pivotal moments. I think back to 2006, about 2006, when texting became popular for adults. My children really were not quite of age to have phones and be texting, but I began texting and I loved it as a form of communication and entertainment because I could be in touch with people while I was waiting in line or when I was someplace that I needed to be quiet. Now, many of my friends were not really big fans of texting. They liked the old-fashioned way of talking on the phone. But lo and behold, they rather quickly adapted. And by 2008, most of my friends had BlackBerries. I thought a BlackBerry was a mysterious object that was reserved for mostly people who took the train into the city and worked on Wall Street.
Yeah, it was more business oriented at that point. I remember that. Yeah.
Right, and not something that mothers of 3 had. But under duress and under a lot of pressure from my friends, I succumbed and I got my own BlackBerry. And I resisted because I knew something would change at that point. And I knew that based on something that my father had told me. He's a professor, and as a professor you have to do a lot of writing, and you write a paper and one of your colleagues will look at the paper and edit it and review it, comment, and give it back to you before you send it in to be published. So in the good old days, he would write a paper and he would mail it to a colleague. And let's say his colleague was in Australia, so it could take 2 weeks to get there. And the colleague would read it and then mail it back, and it was 2 weeks to come back. So you had an entire month off to contemplate. Once he started emailing his papers, it was 2 days and that's it. Came back and you had no break. So I knew that this BlackBerry would change my life in some ways, but I had no understanding of how it would change my life. Then 2 years later, 2010, my daughter started high school, my middle child, and I insisted that she get a BlackBerry. She did not want a BlackBerry. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, I can't believe that this object that was so mysterious to me in 2008, now I'm insisting that my child, and I'm in my 40s when I got it, and I'm insisting my child gets one, but she needed to be able to see her emails from her coach. and about after-school practice. And again, when I was fighting with her about her getting one, I thought, wow, this is so interesting and different, and something is really going on here.
Did it feel wrong in some way or weird? I mean, what was that?
Something, I knew change was happening. I mean, and change was happening quickly. That was, I think, part of what was sort of rang the bell for me. So sometime that year, I was sitting in my kitchen, and my kids were in the family room nearby, and I was half talking to them and half listening to them, and definitely looking at my phone, busy on my phone. And that was the habit. And at some point they said to me, we are not going to talk to you anymore if you have your phone in front of you. Because you start a sentence, and then you get a text, and you get interrupted, and then you completely forget what you were saying to us. And we're done. We've had enough of you. And this is way before, I mean, this is 2010. This is way before parents were saying it to children. Because back then, texting was like 25 cents a text, unless you had an unlimited plan. So most kids were, not using their phones in that way. And that really struck a chord for me when
It's a little wake-up call.
It was a
like
wake-up call, and I prided myself on being an available and an attentive parent, and suddenly I realized that I wasn't. And so that concerned me. So, that went sort of into the back of my mind, and I kept thinking about that. And, over time, I started thinking about how sort of not interesting it is in early years of motherhood, where there's a lot of time that you're alone, and how much time you spend interacting with your children, pointing at something, saying, flower, sky, blue. There's a lot of conversation. And I realized, though, all those hours, I could have actually been looking at my phone instead. And I started to feel concerned about what the impact would be on parenting.
Oh, like the younger generation of parents who never knew, I mean, they never didn't have a phone in their hand, right?
Right. They never didn't have a phone in their hand. And I thought, what's that going to be like?
What is the impact?
Right. So that's sort of where I got started in this.
So it was
through
a very
my children,
personal experience of it.
Right. And it's interesting because it happened to all occur at a window of time where, because I had adapted the technology before them, but just at a turning point where they quickly adapted it right after, we really had this intersection. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah. So then, once that sparked your interest, what was the next step? What did you do?
Well, not a lot, except for talking to anybody that would listen to me and asking questions, because I like to ask a lot of questions, and I have fantasies of doing research studies, getting grants, and researching all kinds of things. But a couple of years ago, I went back to school, and I got my master's in social work, and because of that, I was afforded, entree and the ability to really look at this subject.
Delve into it.
Exactly.
Was there existing research at that point?
Yes, there are. Dr. Greenfield in particular is one of the, he was one of the early people, ringing the bell early, saying we need to pay attention to this. And then he has several other colleagues in the area, in the field, that understood this is a potential problem. So.
And what does the research indicate? What does it say?
There's so much research. So,
yeah.
Do you mean something specific?
Well, like the tip of the iceberg. Like for people who are just watching the show and they really don't know anything about this.
Right.
What would be like the first thing? I know there's probably pros and cons to technology,
Yes.
obviously.
Yes. I think that we are in uncharted territory, basically. So when there's been previous eras of change, and one of the analogies I like to think about is when the car was invented. So the car was invented, and not everybody got a car as quickly as, let's say, with smartphones, because smartphones has been the most rapidly adopted technology in the history of any technology. You think about washing machines and refrigerators and so on. Cell phones have been the fastest if you look at the research on that. So there's a real conundrum in terms of, technology being a positive force for us and technology also being a potentially negative force. And we are really in uncharted territory because things change and happen so quickly, so that initially giving your child a cell phone and allowing them to be able to communicate with you and letting you know where they were was terrific. But then when we started having these unlimited texting plans, the genie came out of the bottle. That's just one example. And suddenly they could communicate with everybody who also had a phone all the time. And then we hadn't even gotten to social media. So, it's really uncharted territory because it's hard to imagine what can happen. But back to horse and buggy and cars. One of the challenges is that, when cars were first invented, there was no need for lanes. There were no lanes in the road before cars. So when there started to be more and more cars, you needed to have lanes. I think I remember years ago reading a little blurb that in Kentucky there were only 2 cars at a certain point, but somehow they crashed into each other. So this need to put some lanes in the road and to give people seat belts for safety, that's some of what we're seeing now. And
so it's like you have to have some kind of a structure and almost like rule. I mean, we have traffic rules to regulate.
Right. Netiquette. Some people refer to that as netiquette.
Yeah, right. So that didn't happen with our technology.
It hasn't happened with our technology at all. No. I mean, people talk about it all the time, and there's a great deal of concern about it, but you've got a lot of parents really concerned about their children, but if you watch parents, they're also, very involved in their phones, especially their phones, because it's portable internet all the time. And I don't judge that. I mean, it's endlessly entertaining and interesting, and there's this illusion of productivity, because if you're reading something interesting, or you're playing chess with a friend, or word with friends with words, it seems like you're doing something productive, but yet you're not interacting with your spouse or your child.
Right. You're missing that real human face-to-face.
The emotional connection starts to become.
Well, talk about connection. It's an exchange of energy that's not really possible, I don't think. I mean, it's a different type of energy.
It's a different type of energy.
Technology.
One of the phrases that we use is being bilocated. So you're here, here, I'm here with you when I'm talking, but if I also have my phone in my hand, I'm also there, wherever there is.
So your attention is not fully either way.
In either place, right. So I'm here, but I'm also here. So whether it's talking to somebody else or reading a news article, I'm not fully here.
So how do you strike a balance between, the positive aspects of technology and the other side of it that could be addictive or could be harmful?
Well, that is the real challenge. I treat a lot of gamers, and there was a time at which children who sort of were socially awkward, not fitting in well with their peer group at school, didn't have other kids to interact with, they would be encouraged to game, and they'd have a headset and they could go online, and it would be a way to interact with a broader population, not just the kids in their school.
Yeah.
And they would have the opportunity to have some success and be a star in a way and in a place where they weren't in their hometown. So that was,
remember those days. Yeah.
right. So that was really very appealing. But that was also before, let's say, game developers, had really begun making games and more games, more alluring, more enticing, more addictive. They understand what brings people in and keeps them at the table. And so now these kids, that it was a tool initially to prevent them from being isolated, it suddenly created isolation for them because they didn't want to leave their house. Why would you want to leave your house when this is now your world?
It's everything right there.
Right.
So yeah, I heard that is, I haven't really read that much about it, but that the way that games are designed, it's literally to keep you moving to the next level, the next level, the next level.
Right.
And that's at every age?
At
this
every
starts
age.
fairly young, right?
I sat in the waiting room at a dermatologist's office a week ago, and there was a 7-year-old little girl there playing a game on a phone. It was like a shopping game, shopping, and you had to cross the street. You had a certain character. You had to cross the street and not get run over. And then she kept showing me the next she'd gotten this character and this character and this character because she had success at crossing and buying things. And she was so excited because she wanted to get, then she needed to get the next and the next. And she couldn't tell me enough about it. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm a complete stranger to you. I'm a stranger. Granted, this is maybe feels like a safe setting.
A safe environment.
Right, exactly.
Still.
But she was so hungry for connection, I think, with somebody who was interested in what she was doing.
Right.
And so compelled to get to the next level of this game.
And she was 7?
7, yeah. And I get it. And it allowed her mother
she
to
just-
go into to the office, and
Oh, I see. So her mother was seeing the
doctor, and she was sitting
in
in the waiting room
by herself. So, it's true that I think parents do use devices as babysitting. I remember when our kids were little, it was just the television.
Right. Right.
While
Right.
you're busy in the kitchen, they're sitting there watching
Right.
television.
Right.
Now they're not. They're
Right.
on the internet playing games like this. That's so interesting.
And I think
happen
it sort
anywhere.
of depends on, there's nutritive and non-nutritive use also.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of game playing, is leisure time. It's healthy, it's fine, it's relaxing. But I would probably call that at some point non-nutritive use. To the extent that, I think a lot about people in one of my social work classes, because we live in the suburbs and we live close to an urban area, we forget that there are a lot of rural communities.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people with financial constraints that can't travel or they're infirm. And so having the internet for them, having a smartphone, allows them to explore the world.
To be part of the larger world.
Be part of the larger world,
Yeah,
see what things would
access.
look like that they would never be able to see, that not enough encyclopedias in the library could cover the amount of material and information that's so accessible to them. So the learning aspect, I think, is highly nutritive. And that's my favorite part of the internet. But I could stay up all night learning, too.
But I think that's also addictive.
It is addictive, and you can ignore the person that you're with because realistically, nobody is as interesting what's in here or what's there.
Oh, wow.
Just not.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah, sometimes I get a little carried away because it's really kind of like when you're researching something or you're looking up for information and then, you hit this link and then all of a sudden, oh, well, there's this other, and pretty soon you don't even remember, or I don't remember what I was originally looking for because it's so interesting.
Well,
right?
it's one of the things that makes the internet so addictive is this time distortion and this productivity illusion. So if it's something, if it's something that seems intellectual and something that you're not looking at and saying, well, this is nonsense, this is, just
Yeah,
the
fluff.
Kardashians fluff,
Yeah.
but if it's interesting, then you can keep reading and looking and reading and looking, and you lose track of time, but you've convinced yourself that you're doing something productive, and to some degree, you are.
Well, yes.
But balance.
But balance, and also little devil's advocate here, because I mean, knowledge is only knowledge.
Right.
So that's really what you're getting when you're finding interesting things. It's really just increasing your knowledge. It's not increasing your connection.
Right.
It's not a personal growth necessarily. I guess it could be.
It can
it's
be.
more knowledge.
Oh, sure.
Because if it takes you somewhere and you're maybe getting another, taking a class or doing something like that. I guess I meant knowledge, just like facts, reading, or interesting things about people or the world. And but you're also missing that spiritual connection.
Right.
I mean, do you
Right.
find that comes up in your work at all?
Well, we are beginning to recognize in the field that spirituality is a significant element in well-being.
Yeah.
And that's sort of newly recognized from a treatment perspective. And what again, this sort of conundrum and irony is that one can argue that technology takes us away from spirituality. And I jotted down, like, talking with other people, how they define spirituality and how I define spirituality. So if you're thinking about it in terms of connectedness or love and respect for your fellow humans and nature, just being in awe of nature, being present, striving for balance and virtue and truth. I mean, if those are all the things that are involved in spirituality, certainly when you offset that with the demands that work creates, technology creates in professional settings where we're always needing to read our emails and do our work on a screen, and then you add in leisure activities that you do on your phone or your computer, there's not a lot of time left for spirituality.
Right, or going inward. A
Going
lot of this
inward.
stuff is focused outward.
Right. So because of the demands of technology, you could argue that there's a greater need for spirituality. So that's kind of a conundrum there. What's also interesting is that because most people were bound by dominant and traditional religion that they grew up with, that's all there was for them. But now when you can start exploring, because you've got this information tool in your hands, when you can start exploring other ideas and other concepts, people are no longer bound. Spirituality can mean anything and everything to whoever the beholder is.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of it. That it really, and this is what I find most interesting and challenging with the whole modern technology is it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, it's created a spiritual movement because people understand now there's more than just Christianity and Judaism.
Right. It has just opened up a whole new plethora of options.
And they found other people that think similarly to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of communities. It's interesting. I started a meetup, and it's called Spirituality 101, and this was just kind of a lark. I did this a couple of years ago. And come to find out, about Meetup, right? So there's
I do, yes.
thousands of different meetups. And if you just Google, or not Google, but search spirituality, there's like tons of them just in our local area. So that to me was a very positive thing. I'm like, so it's just whatever people want, they can find.
Right. And how many people
Yeah.
were talking about spirituality, do you think, 10 and 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Not, I mean, I don't really
No,
remember hearing that.
No, and all sorts of, like you said, it's something, it's a very personal and individual
Right.
thing, you know, because
Right.
everybody defines it in a different way, really.
So we're sort
Yeah.
of being driven away from it in one way and drawn towards spirituality in another. And that is just the irony and the conundrum for me, you know, in every step when I think about the internet and technology. With social media, you know, it allows people to connect. People haven't connected, they haven't seen people in a long time, or you're able to keep abreast of,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, unfortunately, often you find out if somebody's had a loss in their family
Right.
on Facebook that you wouldn't have known, and then you reach out to them, and they're so happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
But then you're also seeing everybody having a good time, and it looks
Right.
like they're having a better time than you're having, and you know, it breeds this
Yes.
feelings of inadequacy and missing out, and
Right, so the challenge is, I mean, how do you frame it for your clients? Like, what is the challenge for them, and how would you?
well, I tend, you know, not to get the opportunity to speak on such a global,
Yeah,
you know, global
that's true,
perspective
'cause
when
it's
I'm
very
dealing.
specific.
Right. So somebody will generally come with a very specific, you know, issue related to technology. So, you know, frequently it's gaming, definitely social media, you know, and has caused a lot of problems and anxiety in children, you know, or not
Right.
necessarily children, really young adults. Pornography and the availability
another
of
issue.
that is, you know, accessibility on the internet is doing all kinds of
Oh, gosh.
damage to relationships
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
young men in particular.
But you have an opportunity, though, to share this big picture with your clients.
I do
and with
try to.
everybody in the audience
I
tonight.
do.
And so we're going to put your contact info up on the screen.
Thank
because
you.
people might want to reach out to you with questions, and I'm sure you're happy to answer them.
I'd be very happy to answer them. It's a subject I feel really passionate about.
Yeah, so you can, answer questions, and you also do workshops, or you do talks in the
I
area?
do. I
and-
speak in the area. I have a couple of speaking engagements coming up, and I'm going to be doing a training in the Fairfield school system, speaking with their professional staff and making them aware of, you know, what to look out for.
Oh, that's great.
Right, what to
So
look
you
out
can
for
do
in terms
this-
of addiction with, you know, high
Yeah,
school
that's
and
awesome.
younger kids. But it's, you know, what's so, you know, we've talked about kids here, and there's a lot of talk about kids, and everybody's focusing on the kids, and I think that's really important. But it is very much also the adults. The kids do, but they see the adults do.
Right, we're the models for them, so this is something to be aware of. Well, that's great, you're
Yeah.
getting the word out.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're open for,
and also driving. Driving's another.
oh gosh, we could do a whole show on that, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Where it used to just be texting and driving was
Yeah.
the problem. Now, because you can do everything on your phone, and we
yeah.
can't stand to be bored.
Wow, well, I am.
Can't put it down.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you were here tonight and to share with us all of this
Thank you.
information. It's really important, and thank you for doing the work that you do.
Well, thank you. It's very exciting, and I'm so happy to have you inquire about it and
Yeah.
be able to help spread the word. It's important for us to
Yeah.
look at.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thanks to all our viewers for being here today. And we hope to see you on the next Spiritual Connection. And I'm Katie Augustyn, your host. And you can contact me through my website, which is transformationcenterct.com, or reach me at transformationcenterct@gmail.com with any questions, or if you have any ideas for the show, I'd be really more than willing to hear them. Okay, thanks again. Good night, everybody. Yeah, this is.